So lots to discuss with former F1 driver Karun Chandhok. Good afternoon to you. I'll come to the details of what David Croft was saying in just a moment. But first to that very considered, maybe downbeat performance from Toto Wolff, suggesting that he, and in particular Lewis Hamilton, might not have the appetite to carry on. What do you think?
I think they're still feeling the pain of the title loss from Abu Dhabi. Personally, I would be very surprised if we don't see either of them in Bahrain next season at the opening Grand Prix. I think Lewis, yes, he's hurt and Toto's hurt. And at the moment, you know, as Toto said, they're feeling a bit disillusioned with the sport. But I think ultimately they want to come back and chase that goal of becoming a world champion for the 8th time, or certainly Lewis does, because that's, you know, will set him apart as being statistically the all-time greatest in every metric of the sport. And I still believe we will see him on the grid next year.
What about some of the substance of what David Croft was saying just there in that excerpt we've just played, that quite a lot needs to change, essentially, in the way Grand Prix are run week in, week out?
100% agree. You know, I think what's become clear this weekend is that whatever the decision-making process was for that final call wasn't the right one. In certainly in a couple of ways. You know, look, what we can't change, or what Lewis and Toto couldn't change, was Nicholas Latifi having an accident 5 laps before the end of the race. Latifi had a crash, and absolute normal procedure was to call the safety car out in that instance. I don't think anyone can doubt that. That's just bad luck for Lewis. Back in 2008, he got lucky. He got a rain shower towards the end of the race. That was a benefit for him, and he won that championship. So Latifi crashing at a time that was not suitable to Lewis is bad luck. I think what they're upset about is the way the last lap unfolded, where only certain cars were allowed to unlap themselves, which was highly unusual, and also the procedure where the safety car was called into the pits straight away after the lap cars were let pass. And I think where the FIA could have really helped themselves is by making that decision earlier. If they had made the decision 30, 40 seconds earlier, and that's all we're talking about, 40 seconds earlier, they would have got all the lap cars passed. They would have made the decision before the penultimate lap, and all the right procedures and processes would have been followed. And in the end, everyone would have sat there and gone, it was just bad luck for Lewis that Latifi crashed. But because the procedures weren't followed to a T, that's what's created this whole, you know, this whole storm.
It's also a lack of clear communication, isn't it? If you listen to, you can see it on the Sky Sports website, the edited version of the drivers talking to their teams about what was going on and what wasn't going on in those few laps right at the end of the race. They clearly could not understand what was happening.
But what is interesting, even within that, is drivers such as Sebastian Vettel and Fernando Alonso, the two experienced champions, multiple champions, knew straight away that if they wanted this race to finish under green flag conditions, they had to release the lap cars. You know, Fernando was calling it from 4 laps from the end. Vettel was calling it from 3 or 4 laps from the end. So they could see it unfolding. They could already see that these processes had to happen for them to be able to restart the race with all the lap cars let through. So when those two drivers in the heat of the battle in the race car without all of this other information could see that, the FIA do have to think about why they couldn't see that.
Do we also need a ruling that team bosses, teams, can't talk to and lobby the race director during the race?
Yes, I think that's important. You know, at the end of the day, this should be a sport which is controlled by the regulatory body, i.e. the FIA, and they shouldn't have to face pressure from the competitors. I think that's wrong, and that should change for next year.
It was, in the end, Max Verstappen's first title, what he's been dreaming of for so many years, and there was praise for him from Mercedes as well. Is there any sense within him or within the sport that he sort of needs to win it without all this controversy, so that he's seen as a champion without an asterisk, if you know what I mean?
Well, I'm sure the Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes fans feel that, but Listen, my personal view is that Max is a deserving world champion. In every race he finished this year, he was first or second in 18 out of the 22 races. He soaked up the pressure brilliantly. And yes, we're all talking about Abu Dhabi because it was right at the end, and Max got lucky with that safety car and Latifi's crash at the end. By his own admission, he knows he got lucky. But you only have to rewind to earlier in the year, in April, when Lewis was stuck in the gravel trap, trying to reverse, lost nearly a minute, and he got lucky because there was an accident between his teammate Bottas and George Russell, his future teammate, and that brought out a red flag, and Lewis got lucky. And if that hadn't ever happened, he would have been, 18 points behind anyway. So you need a bit of luck in this sport. It just so happened that Max got it at the last race with a lot of eyeballs and a lot of pressure, and Lewis got it back in April on a damp day in Italy. So, listen, I believe he's a deserving world champion. He delivered absolutely to the highest level, as did Lewis. You can make a great case for both of them to be deserving world champions, but ultimately it was Max who got it. And, we just have to say congratulations to him and his team.